How many RPGs open by asking you to burn down a helpless village, only to hand you the keys to a flying whale and hurl you at the literal surface of the moon before the 60-minute mark? Not many, and that is why Final Fantasy IV, never mind the confusing 2 on my childhood cartridge, remains equal parts bizarre fever dream and indispensable chapter in video game history. One second, you are brooding as Cecil Harvey, a dark knight who probably listens to way too much 1991 power metal. The next, you are watching tiny SNES sprites sob over twin mages who willingly petrify themselves to prop open a stone door. Need comic relief. The game pauses its melodrama so an elderly sage can shout, "You spoony bard," at a harp-wielding prince. Square apparently decided Shakespearean insults, lunar crystals, and a whale-shaped starship belonged in the same soup, and somehow the flavors work. Fundamental? Absolutely. Underrated. In the shadow of its flashier younger siblings, yes. Weird. The Lunar Whale's engine hum has been echoing in my head for 30+ years, and I still could not draw you its fuel system without giggling. Historical context. Let us rewind to 1991, that magical slice of time when Super Nintendo controllers still smelled faintly of fresh plastic, and Sega's marketing department was shouting blast processing through television speakers like a door-to-door evangelist. Square, freshly flushed from Final Fantasy III's million-selling success in Japan, wanted its debut Super Famicom entry to prove 2 things. First, the 16-bit hardware could make role-playing stories feel like Saturday morning TV serials, and second, random encounters did not have to move at the speed of molasses. Director Hironobu Sakaguchi assembled a team of roughly 14 core devs, among them Takashi Takeda on event design and Hiroyuki Ito on systems. According to Takeda's own recollection in a 2017 Famitsu retrospective, they wrote a feature-length screenplay first, complete with stage directions for Cecil's many kneeling regrets, then chopped and shuffled scenes until they fit onto a 1 megabyte, 8 megabit ROM. That may sound tiny today, but in 1991, it felt like someone had handed Square a suitcase full of raw gold. Nobuo Uematsu's soundtrack alone devoured nearly 25% of the cart budget, so the rest of the assets were compressed with wizardry that makes modern indie devs whistle in admiration. Square originally intended to bring both Final Fantasy IV and a separate, even beefier Final Fantasy V to the Super Famicom within a year, labeling them 4 and 5 internally. Scope creep struck, the second project split into what became our Final Fantasy 5 and 6, and marketing scrambled. For Western territories, the publisher chose to call 4 Final Fantasy II, reasoning, correctly, that North America had only seen the original NES entry. The renumbering solved exactly one problem while birthing a decade of barroom debates, fan translation communities, and magazine correction boxes. My rental store's Sega-loving clerk still insists 4 is really 2 every time I visit out of nostalgia. The renaming also coincided with a feature pruning pass. Square produced an easy-type Japanese build to court younger players, then used that as the backbone for the American localization. Many advanced spells, Asuna Tier 2, Curse, Drain songs, vanished or were truncated, but the battle engine and core story survived intact. I first spotted the import cartridge at a microplay in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The cover art, a Yoshitaka Amano watercolor of Cecil holding his blood-red sword beneath a purple meteor shower, popped like neon on the cramped shelf. The clerk, bless his older brother instincts, warned me the menus were kanji heavy. I bought it anyway, then spent afternoons cross-referencing a printout from the fledgling rec.games.video FAQ with my pocket Japanese dictionary. When the official North American cartridge arrived that November, I discovered the translation had swapped Dark Wave for Darkness and simplified most item names, but the emotional gut punches hit just the same. On the wider industry stage, Final Fantasy IV arrived weeks before Sega unleashed Sonic the Hedgehog and the US console discourse turned toward Twitch speed and mascot attitude, leaving Square's slower, text-driven opera to fight for magazine page space. Yet those who bit discovered a new layer of sophistication, a battle system that refused to wait politely for your decisions. In interviews archived by Den of Geek, system designer Hiroyuki Ito said inspiration struck while watching Formula 1. He wanted a combat loop where participants cut in based on reflexes the way drivers slipstream past each other. Thus, the active time battle gauge was born, invisible in the original release but ever tick-tocking beneath the surface, urging players to choose commands before enemies lapped them. The cartridge shipped at a lean 1 megabyte, yes, but the tech flexed everywhere. Mode 7 airship rotations, parallax castle windows, and sprite-scaled explosions for bomb enemies that left my CRT trembling. Developers at the time joked they were writing with chopsticks on pixels, because every dialogue revision risked breaking compression tables. The iconic Spoony Bard line allegedly emerged from that crunch. Translator Kaoru Moriyama typed Spoony as a whimsical stand-in for foolish during a late-night pass. The team laughed, and the placeholder shipped. Moriyama herself confirmed in a Legends of Localization interview that the line was left in intentionally once everyone fell in love with it. Mechanics, active time battle deserves its own museum exhibit. Picture traditional turn-based combat as a polite cue at the DMV. Now imagine someone sneaks a conveyor belt under everyone's feet. Some characters slide faster thanks to higher agility, and when your ticket number pops, the clerk shouts, "Next," whether you have reached the window or not. That chaos is ATB. The Super Famicom masked the gauges by default. The PlayStation and later releases render them as visible bars, but in 1991, players learned to feel the rhythm from audio cues. The main battle theme's heartbeat motif literally ticks at the same metronomic interval as a mid-game enemy's default ATB fill. A genius bit of ludonarrative alignment I only appreciated years later. Fixed party lineups let Square design bespoke synergies. Take Kain's jump. From an uptime perspective, the Dragoon spends half his turn soaring off screen, invulnerable, and returning with double damage. That free dodge window proved essential against bosses who counter every ground hit. Meanwhile, Rosa's aim bypasses row damage penalties, turning basic bows into sniper rifles. Tella's Recall tosses random black magic that might nuke the battlefield or whiff entirely. Yes, he is the original gacha. Although players lamented the loss of job switching from Final Fantasy III, the script forcibly rotates party members so often that experimentation survives via necessity instead of menu tinkering. Little wonder later, MMOs borrowed story-locked parties to teach roles. Cecil tanks, Tella nukes, Yang punches, and so forth. Dungeon gimmicks lean into theatricality. The Dark Elf's magnetic cave forbids Metal Gear. Equip a mithril hammer there. And the game spams, "You are paralyzed," until you learn to swap armor sets. Square smuggled a design lesson into narrative context. Metal disrupts the Dark Elf's spell, lore, and mechanics handshake. The Tower of Zot cranks tension by piping Golbez's taunts over loudspeakers, while environmental hazards, like rotating traps, chip HP between scripted cutscenes. Later titles such as Xenosaga owe their cinematic pacing to these prototypes. Bosses read like a design team inside joke about teaching players to hold back. The Mist Dragon transforms into fog and counterattacks if struck, essentially training you in patience on the very first mission. The Fiend of Fire, Rubicante, throws his cloak around himself to regenerate, prompting a choose-your-moment puzzle long before From Software turned parry windows into a religion. A TB's real genius shows under pressure. Take the Magus sisters. Their Delta attack loop requires you to snipe Cindy, the healer, before she revives Sandy, the nuker, while Mindy, the reflect buffer, ricochets spells. Every command you pick eats real time, so indecision equals death. The SNES hardware cannot multitask audio channels when cues overlap, but Square scripts the sisters' chatter to drop on priority 0. You can literally hear them mocking your hesitations. Nothing, however, tests persistence like the pink-tail grind. Deep in the lunar subterrane lurk flan princesses, pink blobs that rarely spawn unless you burn siren items. Each princess has a 1 in 64 chance, 1.56%, to drop the pink tail. Battles always feature 5, so the overall per-fight probability rises to roughly 7.6%. Statistics say you might pull a tail in under an hour, but RNG jokes that might means 9 hours on a glass tube CRT while your palms sweat. Exchange the pink tail with a dwarf smith and you receive adamant armor, practically cheat code protection that turns the final boss into target practice. The reward's sheer brokenness justifies the slog, creating one of gaming's first recorded loot grind sagas. Secret rooms elevate the sense of developer-player camaraderie. Tucked behind a false wall in the Dwarf Castle weapon shop sits the developer's room, complete with chibi sprites of the actual programmers complaining about deadlines and charging criminal prices for tents. One NPC cracks that he coded the entire bestiary after lunch yesterday. This peek behind the curtain predates Toby Fox's Dog Shrines and From Software's patches by decades, yet already nails the wink and nod tone modern devs strive for. Equipment minutia spice up combat math. Excalibur, note the missing eye in the original script deals holy damage, making it Cecil's ace against undead in the Cave of Summons. Edge's ninja stars chew through damage cap limits. Rosa's Prey, a random free cure most localizations renamed Bless, has a hidden base chance tied to her spirit stat, a value not visible without external strategy guides. Square was effectively running secret patch notes before the internet forced openness. All of this is accompanied by a soundtrack so loaded with motifs it could headline a symphony hall. Theme of Love became part of Japan's national middle school music curriculum in 2008, the Ministry of Education citing its melodic richness as ideal for teaching six-note phrasing. Nobuo Uematsu later told Dengeki that he wrote the piece in 30 minutes after Sakaguchi asked for something that feels like first romance and last farewell at once. Flex much? Legacy and influence. Final Fantasy IV's most visible legacy is ATB. Square reused it in Final Fantasy V, 6, 7, Fate, 9, and numerous spin-offs. It sneaks in modified stamina form into Secret of Mana, where the action bar must recharge before another swing. Outside Square, franchises as varied as Grandia and Child of Light riff on the real-time turn-based hybrid. Western CRPGs, especially Baldur's Gate's optional live pause mode, clearly absorbed the lesson that menus can move while you think. Narratively, the game proved console audiences craved serialized drama, story arcs that kill characters mid-game and resurrect them later or let them exit permanently became staple tactics in every JRPG worth its salt. Kain Highwind's perpetual heel face turns laid groundwork for future conflicted allies. Magus and Chrono Trigger, Bash in Final Fantasy Thuthine, and yes, even Axel in Kingdom Hearts. The edgy frenemies club meets Thursdays. Localization culture gained a rallying point. Fans upset by the easy-type edits formed translation groups like J2E in the late 1990s, inserting missing spells, uncensored dialogue, and even redrawing sprites. Those grassroots projects evolved into today's ROM hacking scene and taught many future indie writers their first scripting lessons. You could argue Undertale's fan-centric localization owes a spiritual debt to the uproar around Spoony Gate. Sales data underscores the impact. The Super Famicom release moved roughly 1.44 million units in Japan, while Western numbers, muddied by rental culture, hover around 500,000. Ports on WonderSwan Color, PlayStation, Game Boy Advance, DS, iOS, and Steam pushed total sales past 3 million by 2007, according to Square Enix corporate slides. That breadth means an entire generation touched Cecil's redemption arc in some form, cementing him as brand DNA. Why then does IV not dominate best of lists the way Spec or Seventh do? Partly timing. Spikes benefited from pixel art maturity and dramatic Mode 7 opera sets. 7 surfed CD-ROM marketing tidal waves. 4th looks restrained by comparison. Also, the Western renumbering confused fan discussions until the PlayStation compilations fixed titling. Finally, the story's earnestness. True love, redemption, brotherhood reads melodramatic to players raised on grittier narratives. Yet scratch the surface and you find thematic Bones later series entries recycle. Moral ambiguity, Cecil's penance, cosmic horror, Zeromus, and multicultural alliances, dwarves, Mysidians, Lunarians. Closing paragraph plus score. Final Fantasy IV is the SNES cartridge that will not let you dawdle. Its invisible stopwatch chimes even if you pause to admire Amano's curlicue armor designs. It catapults your party out of airships, down waterfalls, across lunar seas, and into the heart of a vengeful star, all before disc-based RPGs invented loading screens. It hands you a whale as a starship because Square believed correctly that whales are cooler than rockets. Do some mechanics creak today? Absolutely. The random encounter rate in the Sylph Cave could drive a Zen Master to hurl controllers, and late game Edge can steal 3 turns before Sleepy Fusoya unpacks a single meteor incantation. But summon that opening trumpet fanfare and you instantly remember why the phrase Spoony Bard remains gaming shorthand for affectionate ribbing. Final score, 9.5 out of 10. The missing half point belongs to the pink tail drop rate, which still torments perfectionists, and to the localization cuts that hid entire spell tiers from young American minds. Everything else, moon whales, stopwatch battles, and an emotional script that paved the highway for narrative-heavy blockbusters, stands timeless. If anyone asks whether IV still holds up, grin knowingly and urge them to start a new file, then walk away confident that by the time they reach Mysidia, they will feel the quiet panic of an unseen ATB bar nudging them ever forward.